Welcome to COVID Creativity. Over the last 2 months and a bit, many small business owners have just had to rapidly change how they're doing business. And some of us have done it, some of us haven't done it, some of us are still continuing to do it. And so this webinar is all about different ways that you could consider as you're trying to brainstorm of what to do as we move forward. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about a lot of examples, but we're going to walk through kind of the basic things all the way to some of the more advanced things that we're seeing. So government programs and all the subsidies and loans that are available, walking through how to manage creatively our own cash flow, how to get online in various ways and what kind of getting online makes sense, how to pivot into virtual, how to pivot our manufacturing, how to have new supply chains during this time, and then ending with probably the most important thing that many businesses are doing at this point is really focused on the customer loyalty and what does this mean post-COVID or whatever that future looks like. So let's jump in. The first thing is government programs. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this, mostly because it is pretty simplistic and it is not as creative as a small business owner to look at this. This is kind of a need to do and need to have to do thing at this point in time. And so there's lots of different government programs depending on where you are. There are going to be some wage subsidy programs. There's going to be some rent support. There's going to be loan programs that are out there. And we're seeing some countries actually doing export support or new investigation or investing in innovation at this time as well. So in each case, they are going to be asking for some proof. So your own documentation, your own bookkeeping and accounting is going to be important. And there's going to be some stiff penalties for any fraud related to any of these subsidies that are available. Many of the subsidies are for 3 months. Some of them are being extended. And then of course, the question for many of the governments is how long are we able to do some of these subsidies before the impact is too huge on the country itself? So something to be looking at for all small business owners, and it is a must to do at this point in time. In terms of wage subsidies, that is going to be something that is on any government website promoting it. Any of your accountants would know about this type of information. For rent support, that's something that you actually work directly with your landlord on. For loan programs, such as all of the financial institutions are partners with the government. And then for innovation and for export support, those are going to be individual ministries that are now launching new programs at this point in time. So something definitely to start with. But once we get through kind of the basics of what are the various subsidy programs that are out there, now we have to turn to our own business and say, what else can we do? So the very first thing that we want to look at is our cash flow. And so maybe we can't do business now, but we want to make sure that we're there in the future. And so there's many creative ways to do this. I know that in the province of Saskatchewan, almost immediately in some of the rural or small towns, many of the cafes and restaurants actually started selling gift cards just for cash flow to get them through to a point in time where they were able to start operating again or operating at least on a limited basis. And because all the locals wanted to ensure that that cafe or restaurant was around in the future, many of them actually bought the gift cards just to help with the cash flow. And so this is a strategy that's been used in some of the rural and small towns, and especially effective when you already have a loyal customer base. Memberships are another way to do that. And so I know a lot of gyms have memberships, and they made offers. They said, keep your membership going and we'll refund based on understanding how limited access you had during this time. Other memberships moved to virtual or online. Some were absolutely canceled outright. But what happened a lot for anything that was a membership, like for trailer parks or recreational properties and things like that, where people would have limited or no use, and yet there had to be some sort of upkeep or maintenance or membership or fees, regular fees to it. Just being creative and being very transparent in what's available. And a lot of early communication happened within the first 2 weeks on any of these. For cash flow, Then there's the other practicalities of this. So the creativity with gift cards and memberships and what is possible there. But on the flip side, there's reduced costs. So what can you reduce? What can you cut out? And just focus on retaining any reduced income as a key. So cash flow has a few different opportunities in here, but just taking a look at what's your costs, what are your revenues, what's possible at this point in time, even at the reduced level. And so another very creative example would be an irrigation system. So with some of the loosening of what is allowed at this point, an irrigation company actually, to help with cash flow, what they offered to all of their customer base is to pay the startup of the irrigation as well as the end all at once. And that helps them with their forecasting in terms of hires, so that they know if they do need to furlough any of their staff. And so they got all the cash up front. Just being creative when they think about cash and what decisions needed to be made and how to help with their transparency on that. They said that we'll open up all the irrigation systems and close and wrap it up at the end of the season, but we want all the cash up front, and what does that look like? And so that helped them with their cash flow. So after cash flow, there's just getting online. So, I mean, in 2020, the majority of businesses already had some sort of online presence in some way, and yet some didn't. And so a really easy way to get online immediately without having to create a whole new website is any of the existing marketplaces. So you have eBay, you have Yahoo Store, and then you also have Etsy and some other more niche marketplaces that are out there. And so Etsy, as you can see on this, is an online platform that allows independent sellers to manufacture things and then sell directly to people. And many of them here actually started making masks right away. And so you can see that example on the right-hand side. But getting online, you don't always have to create your own website from scratch, and this was an alternative to doing that. But at the same time, there are some businesses that were already online and might create a new website for whatever this new pivot was in terms of being online. In this instance, this organization actually sells food and snacks and coffee directly to offices. And so when all the offices were closed, what do they end up doing? They create a new website to actually do grocery delivery. So you can use existing marketplaces for whatever your new products or services or however you've pivoted that way. But in this case, they actually created this website over a weekend and were able to launch home grocery delivery in a very time-effective manner. So getting online is one thing because that's a portal to do many of these other things, but then how do we actually pivot some of our services? So we have seen not just manufacturing changes, but people actually changing how they deliver services. Counseling is a great example. So if you have a therapist, if you have grief therapy work, family counseling, parent counseling, anything like this, any sort of counseling is possible to do virtually and not necessarily face-to-face. In fact, we know that medical consultations and chiropractic consultations have also made some attempt to go virtually as and where possible. So lots of pivoting in that direction. Another one would be exercising. So we know that gyms being a place that there's lots of interaction between people, well, they all closed down. And so how do you actually keep up your fitness? Well, many of the memberships went to a virtual gym and even yoga being virtual. And so can you actually do things online? I know that for soccer, for youth who are actually learning how to play soccer, many of their practices are actually online and they'll get training separately, but to do via any of the video conferencing, being able to watch the drills and do the drills at a high pace with each other, some camaraderie with their team, that was all a really important thing. And then camps. So we've also seen all the summer camps, all the March break camps. Many of them wanted to still provide some respite for the parents and to still have that interaction with the kids. And so having a virtual camp, it might not look the same. It might be half a day or a couple hours or something like that, but having access to being able to pivot the service to something online. I know that for the virtual camps, one thing that they realize is that it can't just be online. Because not everyone has the same types of supplies at home. So some day camps in the summer are actually planning on sending camp kits that are mailed to people's homes so that all the activities throughout the week, they can take part in fully, understanding that they already have all the supplies that they need. And so there's been some interesting ways that this has been handled throughout North America. So after the virtual service pivot, which seems to be something that is achievable as well as getting online, now you have the manufacturing pivot. And obviously this takes a lot more because you might not have all of the supplies or you might not have the expertise on something, especially if it's going to be something complicated like the N95 masks. However, everyday supplies, everyday things that maybe people do have been converted over. A great example would be a tapestry company no longer had the demand for tapestries that were being handmade, so they actually did pivot into making masks. Another example was a children's clothing store who actually handmade all the clothes, and again, they also pivot into masks. Any company that does any sort of mixing or blending, they would have the capabilities to create hand sanitizer with just different chemicals in order to manufacture that. And then other PPE being probably a lot more technical and ensuring that it hits the quality standards that are required for that. And yet some basic pivots of things that really had a high demand at the time. And so that continues to happen of what else is possible based on what we already have. And now there's the new supply chain. So not only are we pivoting our products and services, we're pivoting how it's delivered. So some examples of new supply chains that were created is number one, wine and beer delivery. This happened specifically in Toronto, where many of the restaurants were no longer in operation, and yet they had the supply of their beer, their wine, their liquor, and a pop-up organization basically started to deliver it for them and take the inventory from the restaurants to sell them and get them a fair price. And so again, that helps with cash flow for the restaurants that were no longer able to serve, and helped individuals who didn't want to have to go to beer and liquor stores and leave their homes, and they wanted to stay safe. And yet this new organization actually created a whole new supply chain. The picture on the right, of course, is a drone, and lots of examples of where drone delivery is actually being experimented with very successfully. Another supply chain that was an interesting one and a new partnership and collaboration that came out of this is food banks having all this excess food at this point in time, trying to ramp up for all the need that is in the pipeline. Actually, where do they store all this additional food at this point in time? The food banks actually created a relationship with the libraries because the libraries were all closed as additional space. So that was quite a clever thing to happen. And the last interesting one that I wanted to highlight is the grocery trucks. And so ensuring that there wasn't as many people and that in food deserts and places where people didn't have access to food, is this an interesting thing that could just pop up into a neighborhood or into a parking lot and be made available? And so interesting new supply chains that are being considered at this point. And the last thing really to think about is that during any negative situation, during any crisis, this is a time where if you're doing the right things and if you are staying connected and being helpful, this is a time where you have long-term customer loyalty. So the biggest thing is connecting immediately. So over communicating is never a bad thing to do at this point in time. The next thing is safety updates. So just letting people know the extra measures that you're doing. We've seen that, and continuing to stay on top of that. I know that with some grocery chains, if you have a loyalty program, and if there has been a case of COVID at a store, they're actually notifying their customers. And so it doesn't seem like a very friendly or nice message to have, but the appreciation of having that kind of connection and safety update is really important for customers. And so it does impact their impression about the company in the long run. And so, of course, that then ties into loyalty. A small example would be a yoga company in a small town. What they're doing, it's in Haliburton. They actually are doing online yoga 4 times a week. And what they've decided to do is make them $20 for a class or $50 unlimited for the week. And all of that goes to donations to the food bank locally and to help with food poverty. And so, although they realize that they don't have a lot of opportunity to continue doing the live classes, they've turned it into a cause that's doing good in a time that they weren't able to actually generate revenue to the same level. And so they're actually giving back. And so how will that allow people to think differently about them in the long term and retain some of that customer loyalty? So what we talked about are some of the basic things to some really great things that are happening right now. So government programs, to cash flow management, getting online, pivoting to virtual services, a manufacturing pivot as possible, considering new supply chains and opportunities in there. And then, of course, really ensuring that you're doing that over communication at this time to build and continue to maintain those relationships with your customers. This is from Small Business Solver. Lots of creative ways to make business decisions through over 280 different topics in here, and it is pay what you can. So as you're making some decisions at this point in time, being able to leverage some of these resources, they are available to you. And we hope that you are staying well, staying safe, staying healthy, and that this has helped you become even more creative during this time of COVID.